Welcome back. This is Meat and Monogamy. I am Olivia Lara Owen, also known as Liv, and this is a long form podcast. It's new, and this is where I speak all about nourishment, devotion, self-trust, building a life that can actually hold you. And today I want to speak about something I see all the time in capable, intelligent, brilliant women, which is all of you listening to this and my clients, right? I see this all the time. And this is where forcing clarity no longer is working for you. So this is where like clarity that you used to be able to force, it just doesn't work at certain stages of growth, adulthood, maturation as a woman. Okay. So maybe at earlier points in your life. So an example of this is like times in your life when you were maybe younger at a different stage of the journey where clarity could be forced, right? So this could be like, it was very easy for you to just make a quick decision. It was very easy for you to push through and use a lot of force. Maybe you had doubt, but you could just push through it. You could just make a bold move. I certainly did. I can just recall so many times earlier on in my life where it's just so much easier to just like make a bold move, make a big life-changing decision. And you probably could do a better job at that time of overriding fear. There's a certain like naivety we have that's actually quite beautiful at that time in our lives. And it often kind of worked for us. Like it works to force clarity at certain stages of life. And it's usually because the stakes are lower. Like there's less to lose. That's a real thing. Like when there's actually less to lose, it kind of works to be more forceful and willful in the way you move through your life. And I also think that when we're younger, our nervous systems can tolerate force more than they can when we get older. I think when we get older, we just get more like fatigued and just kind of beaten down where we're like, I can't actually handle more force. Like we pay the price from a nervous system point of view. And as we get older and we tend to get more mature and we evolve, we do tend to be a lot more aware of the cost of things and like the cost certain things are having on us. Okay, so there's like a season of life where speed actually feels really like confidence. And it can look really impressive and it can feel really good and it can kind of work for you for a period of time. Like it's a really common story. Okay. And then there's this moment where it stops working. And so this is what I call thresholds. And if you're familiar with my work, you know that I speak about this a lot. There's this point where, you've built a life and you've experienced a lot of loss. Like you've had some shitty times, like you've felt the consequence, you've seen consequences, you've loved and, you've been heartbroken, you've been disappointed, you've experienced these things and you've grown, like you've taken some responsibility. And suddenly, like the old strategy of just like quick decisions and forcing and will and just like going at it really intensely, it just actually isn't producing clarity for you in the way that it once was. And actually what you're finding is it's like making you more anxious and it's making you obsessed and it's making you go in circles of like, why doesn't the old way work? Like I just used to be able to like force my way through this and I just can't. And you get kind of stuck in this like circular kind of really unhelpful loop. And what I will say at this stage, like when it actually is not working anymore, it kind of like you try harder and you try really, really hard because it worked for before, but it doesn't bring you clarity. It actually brings a kind of form of collapsing and it can feel horrible. It can really feel horrible because you're like, well, the old way doesn't work, but like, what the fuck is the new way? Right? So I want to kind of speak about why it stops working. This is really important because I think you can kind of easily question like, well, am I doing something wrong? Like what's going on? Like, have I just got like less intelligent, less capable as I've got older? Actually, these are really like key things. And I want to highlight three like really important things that I think are the reason why this is not working for you. So first one is that your nervous system is smarter than your mind. Your mind is brilliant. I'm not saying it isn't. Like mind is a fantastic gift that we have, the ability to use our minds. We're not disregarding that. at all. Your mind is brilliant. But when you're dysregulated, your mind is on the hunt for clarity. Your mind is like looking for clarity, certainty. It needs to just relax. But you're actually dysregulated. So what your mind is looking for is relief. It doesn't care how it gets relief. It just wants relief. It doesn't care about the truth. So it can be unhelpful. So actually your nervous system is smarter than your mind. And that is a good thing, because if your mind is leading, you can mistake urgency. Like, yep, we just need to make a decision. Yep. Okay, great. As truth, like, or intuition. Like, okay, well, I just had this feeling that I need to go and do this thing, but it's actually not intuition at all. It's actually urgency. You're being driven by something forceful because you're trying to temporarily relieve. Like the mind is looking for relief. Okay. So you may also mistake fear. You might think fear's here. Well, that's a sign. The mind's like, well, I'm afraid. So therefore, that means this. And actually fear is just, I always say this to my clients, fear is so intelligent and it's part of the process and it's something to collaborate with versus fight. And actually fear can be incredibly useful because sometimes it can slow you down. And sometimes you do need to slow down. Like fear can come in when you're actually moving too fast, not necessarily when there's something wrong, just when you need to recalibrate your speed. Okay. So you also might find that like silence and like not knowing what to do and just kind of waiting might feel like danger. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is. And so I will say that clarity cannot come when your body is under threat. And so that is why like tending to your body, tending to your nervous system is so much more beneficial than giving your mind what it needs to relax as a priority, right? Because it's temporary and the mind will just find something else to obsess about or worry about or be anxious about, okay? The body, like actually regulating your nervous system, you get so much more bang for your buck, right? Because actually clarity can come when you are more regulated and relaxed. So the reason why this is like part of why this function stops working and why like the old way stops working is because there's this way that you're not really recognizing the benefits of you're not recognizing the benefits of regulation versus mind. I would call it mind masturbation. Another reason I think why this stops working is the stakes are higher now. So an example is at 22, you could quit and start again. So you could take more of a bold risk at 35, 48, 50. You're going to have different responsibilities. You might have a partner, you might have a mortgage, you might have children, you might have a reputation, you might have a community to consider, right? You might have parents, dependent parents. Like there's a bigger impact to fast decisions without really like allowing the consequence of decisions to really land. Okay. So the stakes are really real. And that's why a lot of the times it stops working the old way, because something is stopping you. Something is saying, actually, like your system's actually starting to calculate the impact that you're having. And that's really a sign of great maturity. And I think sometimes if you've always been someone who took loads of risks, you can be like, well, I'm weak now because I'm not willing to risk it all. But actually it's very mature and smart. In my own journey, I moved to Paris when I was 29. And I'd always wanted to move abroad. I had moved abroad a couple of years prior, but I'd moved quite hastily. It hadn't really worked out. I wasn't really in the place to just jump into a new country. And so I'd come home and I'd kind of rebuilt my life, and I was in a much stronger position to, radically change my life, which is like moving overseas and rebuilding a life. It really is a huge lift. It's a beautiful, you reap the rewards of that gift over time, but the initial kind of leap and the setting up is a very intense kind of beginning, and it can take many years to really settle down somewhere new. But at 29, cusping 30, I was kind of like, well, I've built my business. I've got financial freedom. I've got location freedom. There was an opportunity. I'm just going to go for it. And then when I left, I think I was 34 when I left, and I ended up moving back to the UK. This wasn't really the plan. I was kind of thinking I was going to stay there. My trajectory was going to be like up, 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 but it wasn't. It was a very circular kind of journey. And I ended up coming back to, where I'm from and tending to the original thread of my life and really starting over at 34. But I wasn't starting over in a new place. I'm starting over in a place where I already had roots. So slightly easier, still difficult, but slightly easier. Now, would I now at 34, when I'm, partnered and wanting to have a family in the very near future and wanting to get married, and I'm tending to my elderly parent who's sick, and I'm in close proximity with my family, and I've put all this effort into rebuilding my life at 34 and rebuilding my business at 35, and I'm also, really at this stage of life where I'm wanting to personally settle down, professionally expand, but personally settle down. I'm not in a huge expansion phase by like wanting to travel and wanting to leave and wanting to go overseas. So for me to do what I did 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when I moved to Paris, it for me right now wouldn't be a wise decision. And I wouldn't make that decision because it's very costly to do that. And it also was very costly to unravel that life. If I had never done that, my life would probably look quite different now. It's not saying it was a bad decision or a good decision. It's just that it takes a lot of resources to go and start your life somewhere. And then if you decide that this isn't for you and you come back, you have to unravel that life and start a new one. It's a huge lift, right? So me as a mother, me as a wife, me as a woman who's in a more steadier season of building a business, I'm going to really measure the impact of that kind of decision. And I'm not just going to make that decision lightly. Like I can't even think of a scenario in which I would be willing to move overseas again anytime soon. Okay. So, and I think that's mature. I think that's me maturing. I think that's me being at a different stage of life and me really understanding the consequence and the cost of things. Okay. So another thing is, why this doesn't work, why the old way doesn't work, is because, quite simply, we're just not meant to live so jacked up and so full of adrenaline. Okay. I'm like, this is so me. Just like, I was such an adrenaline. Junkie isn't even the word. I love that part of myself, just like go, go, go. And I want to experience all the things and more. I did so many big moves. And, at 19, I went to Haiti after the earthquake and I decided to stay working there for 8 years and built this organization and just poured everything into it. And I then did the same with I had a big ending of that. And then I did the same with my, what's now my coaching business. And I moved countries twice. I traveled all over the world. There were these big kind of adrenaline fueled moves in life. And they all required a big transition and ending, right? And I have learned that I can't really do that anymore just on adrenaline. I have to actually have something in the tank, money, time, and energy in order to move through my life. And if I'm just overspending all of my resources to move big and move quickly, it's not really a smart life architectural strategy. Building a sustainable adult life requires capacity, and capacity feels so much slower. Capacity is so much more simple, almost boring, vanilla, less dramatic. Like it's not this like big, shiny, sexy thing. In the last couple of years, I've been going through a, business transition. I took a sabbatical. I closed my business down. I've been rebuilding. This podcast is part of that. I've also been, closing down one life, rebuilding another one, like a lot of change and transition. And I've been doing a lot of that quite privately, quietly and slowly and privately. And the reason why I've chosen that is because it's just allowed me to build the capacity to actually do it without having to share it and expose myself and like have people inside of it with me. I've kept it very small because that is actually what I have the capacity for. It takes a lot of capacity to have these like big announcements and like we're doing this big thing. It actually is so much more sustainable to build slowly, build self-trust with yourself and do it in a sustainable way, that's actually where you have the capacity to hold the life you're building versus like have the life slip through your fingertips. Okay, so, you know, 3 big things here. We've got like your nervous system is smarter than your mind. The stakes are higher now, and that's normal. You're grown up, you're growing up, that's normal. And quite frankly, you don't want to be so jacked up. Like you can't really live off that fuel anymore. The old way of the like, you know, living off crumbs and racehorse energy is unsustainable. And you kind of know that. Like this isn't new. You're not like listening to this being like, what? Liv's talking shit. You're like, no, that definitely feels true. I very rarely speak to people that are like, what? No, yeah, God, no, I'm totally just loving this adrenaline-filled life. You know, we get to a stage where we're like, oh my God, no, we can't do that. So what do we do instead, right? What is the kind of, like, what do I recommend here? Okay, so we know that forcing clarity doesn't make decisions. It doesn't help you. Like it doesn't work for you anymore. Forcing is not helping you. It's not working for you. It's no longer useful in the way that it was. So what does, right? And, you know, I've kind of hinted at some of this already, but this is where, you know, increasing your regulation before you make decisions. This is so key. Okay. And this is actually something that, you know, when you see all the like Instagram memes and the, you know, we see all the like content that's being, what is the one skill that, you know, we should teach our kids? So like the one skill that skills is our ability to be in creative response to life, right? Which is a resourceful response to the situation versus walking through life reacting to everything, right? Reacting to everything, you're on a short fuse and you're just like, it's like every day you get a reset and you just reset and you're just reacting again versus like creatively responding to life and life's challenges. Because life is, I like to think of it 50% shit. Life can be 50% shitty and 50% fucking awesome. That's kind of where like a lot of people say their life is. I mean, I know that there are some of us that do experience more extremes of those, but I would say that it's kind of like what I've experienced, what my teachers have experienced, where it's just kind of like, life is full of shit. Like we do have challenges, and as we grow and we take on more responsibilities, we only have more problems to solve and more like things to manage and more things to, you know, more decisions to make. Like there's just more responsibility and the problems get bigger, right? So that is life. We can't get away from that, right? But it really is helpful to stop demanding immediate answers from life. Stop demanding it from yourself. Give yourself a fucking break to just not have to decide right now, like to not need immediacy, right? Like allow yourself to, you know, move through something without it having to be clean as a whistle, clear and, you know, definitive in this very moment. Okay. Create containment for yourself. This is so big. So this is like actually having, you know, a life at a particular size where, you know, you can actually fill the walls of your life. Your life isn't just this massive thing that you're just like completely overwhelmed. Create containment, join containers, hire a coach, work with me. It's this like way that you can be held inside of an actual container. And containers are so useful. Okay, they are so useful because you can actually be held as you're in a process with something. Right? Not held because you want someone to give you the answers, but held because you need containment, right? So another thing that I think is really a way to do this differently is to learn how to sit with questions longer than you're used to, right? Sit with questions and, you know, don't like listen for the immediate answer, but allow a question to be like a living and breathing thing. I always like to say that the life we're living is an answer to is the answer to the questions we ask ourselves. This is something that one of my teachers taught me along the way and taught me this in so many different ways. And like, I really believe that. And if you're not like, your life isn't feeling aligned, like actually, like, how do you ask a different question and sit with maybe a harder question and figure out what question you really need to be asking yourself. This is really powerful. Coaching and containment can really help you figure out, what are the questions I should be asking myself right now? Like, what are the things I really need to be thinking about? Okay. Another thing that I think is really helpful, how do you do this differently, is build capacity first. Build capacity first. Like, stop chasing clarity. Clarity is not something you chase. Clarity is something that emerges. Clarity is something that comes. And it usually comes when you stop trying to hunt it down. Like, oh, I need it, I need it, I need it, I need it. I need to discharge the discomfort that I'm in. Okay. So sometimes building, the most self-trusting moves you can make is increasing your ability to actually sit with the unknown, to sit with not knowing. It is like one of the biggest things that I do with my women, do with my clients, is we sit with the unknown and we allow things to emerge, clarity to come. We don't force it. We don't like force solutions. We actually allow them to come naturally. Those are the ones that are actually going to, move something in your life, because it's going to come from a true place. It's going to be led by truth, not from urgency and panic. Okay. So, for me, I've tried all of this. I've tried to force clarity. It pops up all the time as like a tried and tested strategy. It's like, well, let's just do this, this, and this. And, I'm feeling it right now in the rebuild of my business. And, I am where I am. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I was here before and I need to get there again. And so I need to like come up with an answer of how I get there. And it's like, well, that's actually not what's truth, right? That's not the truth right now. That's not the question I'm asking myself. I'm not trying to get to where I was before as quickly as possible. That's not the intention here. But there's a part that like wants to do that, right? Same, my romantic partnership, like, you're with another person and your relationship is unfolding and you're creating it together. And there's so much neither of us know about the future. And it's like, we're clear on our commitment and what we're building, but you don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know what tests and, how it's all going to unfold. I don't have clarity and certainty on that. And I'm not going to pretend that I do, right? That would be so torturous. I've made so many decisions from urgency, right? And I've told this story before, but I remember, coming up 2 years ago now, when I left Paris, I felt this kind of truth come in a couple of months before. And then it was like, oh, you're not happy here. Like this isn't actually the place for you. And it was very kind of world shattering at the time, because I had such an established life and I'd spent all of my time and money and energy investing in all this place and this home and my relationships that I really cherished. And it was really like, what? Oh God, have I got to go home? Like, really? And I didn't make an immediate decision from that point. I started having conversations. I really sat with myself for many, many months. And then it just did start to unfold, because it was true for me to leave, but I didn't make that decision overnight. And actually, by allowing that process to unfold and like trusting it and holding myself through it, it actually happened rather quickly. I think if I tried to force things and try to like, make it happen quickly because I was so uncomfortable, I went through all this stuff. I remember there was just like drama after drama with my apartment, like things kept going wrong, but I didn't throw in the towel in the first like slither of like, maybe this isn't aligned. I actually let it unfold. And then when it came to ending and handing in my notice, I just had this really honest conversation with my landlord, and we'd had quite a bit of conflict. And I just was able to say like, this isn't working, is it? And she was like, no, this really isn't working. And I said, I'm going to hand in my notice. And she was like, okay, I think that's for the best. Like, we've both been trying to make it work, right? And it just wasn't working. And so I got to, I had to give up my dream apartment and like, let it all go, and just like didn't know what was next. Didn't know if that meant I was leaving Paris. Didn't know if that meant I was never coming back. I had no idea. I just knew that like I had clarity about the step in front of me, and I was able to respond in alignment to that and like take that decision, right? And so, I think because I didn't force clarity and like operate from urgency, it did actually happen in the process of me leaving happened in quite a contained way, where I didn't overspend my energy in the way that I probably would in the past, when I would have tried to force. No, I'm forcing it. Like, I'm staying, I'm not leaving. I would have just like put everything behind the like the urgent need to not leave and be uncomfortable and like unravel my life. It has been so challenging these last 2 years of unraveling that life. But at the same time, with all of that endings and all of the challenge that's come with that, I have slowly felt the green shoots of the new life. And, you know, the things I deeply wanted, right? Stability, to be near my family, to be partnered, to be building something with somebody, to be preparing to have my family. Like, these are all things I deeply wanted. And I was at that cusp and I was at that threshold where I knew I wanted those things, but I knew where I was, it wasn't happening. So I knew I had to make a change. And that change happened slowly, right? I had to make a very uncomfortable change in order to have the life that I actually deep down on a soul level wanted. Okay. So this is something that I hold my women through all the time, right? Inconvenient truths coming knocking at the door. The fuck do we do when truth's like, hey, actually, this is not working? And you're like, oh my God, I really don't want to hear this right now. What does this mean? Oh my God. Oh. Right. Okay. We take it step by step, right? You are a brilliant, capable woman, right? You do not need to rush. You do not need to panic, right? Build your capacity to be with yourself through the transition. Build your capacity to take it one day at a time. You know, activate your support network. You know, have the conversations you need to have, hire the people you need to hire, like do the things that you need to do to be held and resourced through this transition. Okay. So I've really learned for myself that there's a massive difference in the body between a decision that was been made from like a tight place and an urgent place, and one that's made from a softer place and a steadier place, right? They feel completely different. And that difference is everything. And if I'm ever now trying to make a decision from like a, oh God, like that, like compulsive, just need to make a decision like that, it feels horrible in my body. It feels awful. And I'm like, oh God, I feel like I'm just like discharging my energy. I'm not actually like kind of holding myself steady as a woman. And so this is where, you know, you really do learn the difference. Okay. So if you're listening to this and you're in this place where you really recognize yourself, you're like, I do this all the time. Like, I'm trying to force clarity right now. Like, maybe you're really uncomfortable in the place you're in and it's costing you, right? I want you to know that there's nothing wrong with you at all. There is nothing wrong with you specifically. You are not the problem, but the pattern is the problem. If you are to continually continue this pattern for another year, like, what would your life look like, right? If you don't get the support, the guidance, the space to slow down and like allow yourself to really cross this threshold and face this uncomfortable truth, what happens in a year? Not you're a bad person, you're doing it wrong, you're wrong and bad, but like, what happens if you don't address this, right? What happens if you don't address the pattern? Okay. This is really what I work with you in my deep dives, right? So I do these 75-minute introductory deep dives when you're like listening and like, this sounds like the woman for me. I'm kind of drawn to this woman as a coach. You want to explore this with me. This is exactly what I do in the deep dive. You give it to me large, like, what's going on? Right? What is going on in your life? What is the threshold that you're working through right now? And, you know, what happens if we don't address this? Like, where are we going to be in a year's time if we don't work through this, right? Not to shame and punish you, but just to look at it from a real lens. Okay. So if you resonated with this episode and you feel like, you know what, I actually really want containment and structure support around this, I will put the link in the bio of this episode and you can book your deep dive and you can really get started on changing the needle with some of this. Okay. It has been a pleasure. There's absolutely no rush. The show notes will be here and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you.